All right, Dave Priemer, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks everybody that's on the call. Joining us today live, it's 12:01 here in California. Dave Priemer, thanks so much for joining us. How you doing today, bud?
Hey, my pleasure. Yeah, great. Great to be with you.
Yeah, we're really excited. As you know, Dave is VP of Sales and runs a website that you definitely have to check out. If you haven't gone on and looked at Dave's work, it's amazing. He's over at cerebralselling.com, and it's a website that's set up for people that want to bring the scientific thought process into the sales field. And Dave, will you put that in the comments, or can you have you posted that yet?
Yeah, absolutely. I did. I posted it right when we started, but it should be right at the top of the list there.
Awesome. Awesome. And my name is David Dulany. I'm with Tenbound. We help sales development teams to improve their performance. And just want to thank everybody for joining us. Dave and I are going to be unpacking a topic that is near and dear to my heart, something that I've been trying to figure out for a long time. And I know that Dave's got some major thoughts on it. The silent sales floor. Is it a friend or a foe? And what the heck is going on? Dave, let's just start it out, man. What is the silent sales floor, and why are we talking about this?
Yeah, it's important to define what this thing is. Yeah, I mean, look, the silent sales floor is almost this phenomenon that you can categorize as a shift from folks being on the phone and very noisy and very boisterous to a more serene environment where kind of the talk on the phones and the dialing is being replaced with the clickety-clack of people typing on keyboards, essentially. And so, when people see this happening, especially experienced sales leaders, we look across the floor and we say, my gosh, like, is something wrong? What are people actually doing? It's not as loud and boisterous as, it used to be. And so I kind of fear that there's less actual high value activity happening that is going to later impact my sales results downstream. That's what the silent sales floor is.
Yeah, exactly. And the phenomenon, I think, was crystallized for me in a blog post that came out a couple of years ago on SaaS Scribe, and it was entitled "The Rise of the Silent Sales Floor." And when I saw that, I said, "Hey, that's something definitely that people talk about. It's a concern that people have, especially when they've made a big investment in the sales development team and all the technology and all the bells and whistles that go along with hiring people. And they walk around and, as you said, it's kind of that clickety-clack of keyboards and people going into other rooms to make calls and things like that. And, at the same time, for some of the companies, they might be struggling with their sales development process, and they're going, wait a minute, so I'm not seeing a lot of results. I'm not seeing a lot of appointments, and yet it's really quiet out here. It's almost kind of eerie. So should we be concerned about this? The immediate reaction is, yeah, what the hell is going on? But Dave, you've got some different views on it. What do you think about the silent sales floor? Is it a friend or a foe?
Yeah, I think it's something that's, whether we like it or not, it's something that's here to stay, and it's a shift that's happening in our industry. And so rather than think of it as specific friend or foe, I think of it as, well, how are we going to deal with it? What are people actually doing when they're silent on the sales floor? And how do we improve their efficiency in their selling activities to take advantage of the more serene, cerebral nature of, today's modern sales professional? The idea of sales is that we want to connect with our target buyers. And all of the data says that it's actually getting harder to do that. There's a lot of nuance to it. It's not just the fact that people, you think about the silent sales floor. What's the problem? Are people not trying? Are they not hustling? Are they not looking to connect with their target audience? Are they concerned about being overheard because they're not really up on their pitches, and so they'd rather like scurry into a little room? There's a lot of generational things that are impacting the way people interact at work, specifically on the sales front. So when you think about the generation today, and they're being asked to make lots of phone calls on the sales floor, they might kind of turn to you as a sales manager and say, hold on a second, I don't use the phone in my personal life. Why are you asking me to make phone calls at work? And the people that I'm actually calling may not want to receive those phone calls either. So maybe I'm generationally justified in not making phone calls, right? So there's a lot of different elements. As a sales leader, here's a little secret. I don't have a phone. I mean, I have my cell phone. I don't have a desk phone. It's very difficult for people to reach me. Even if I did have a desk phone, which I did in my previous job, I wouldn't answer it, especially if it was from an outside number, for fear of getting prospected by a salesperson or recruiter. And so I do feel that there's like a shift happening in the market where not only are the new generation of sellers not used to selling and using the phone as much, but as buyers, we're also becoming more conditioned to communicate in a more asynchronous fashion. We like text, we like chat, we like Slack. And so both on the seller side, there's a shift going on, and also on the buyer side, there's a shift going on. And so, part of what I think about when I think about the rise of the quiet sales floor and why it may not be so bad is because it represents a shift towards how modern salespeople and modern buyers would prefer to communicate with one another.
Okay, Dave, so that's a great point. So we know that buyer behavior has changed. And as you mentioned, even as a sales leader, you may not even have a desk phone anymore. But I think the concern that a lot of sales leaders have is when they see the silent sales floor and they walk around is that, it could be a generational thing where the new generation of like SDRs coming in are not used to using the phone, and maybe they don't feel comfortable on the phone. And the immediate reaction is, hey, you got to just pick up the phone because that's what we used to do back in the old days. So just pick up the phone, make more dials, and it'll solve all your problems. So what do you say to when someone comes to you with that?
Yeah, so they're not wrong. It's when we look at, for example, the things in our society that are decreasing in effectiveness. So print, newspaper ads, even cable TV. People are DVRing everything now. The use of phones. So all these things are kind of decreasing in efficiency, but they're still there. There's still people that click on spam emails. That's why spammers still send them. And so there's still that long tail happening. So yes, there is a correlation between calls that you can make and the impact that you'll have. And I'll give you an example. So at my current company, it's definitely a mix, right? It's not quiet all the time, but it can be quiet sometimes. At my previous company, so I used to work at Salesforce, there was always a lot of activity because it was a very phone-centric culture. And I had a lot of reps on my team across 3 different cities. And one of the things I looked at was there a correlation between the number of calls that people were making and their effectiveness in terms of building pipe and closing deals? And what I found was that indeed, yes, there was. When I looked at about 11,000 phone calls that were taking place over the course of a kind of a 4 or 5 month period, I saw there was a very tight correlation between the teams and the reps that were making the most phone calls and the ones that generated the most pipeline. Right? Because there is still that correlation. So I don't think as a sales leader, if you're going to your sales team and saying, hey, just make more calls, I think that's probably a sound piece of advice. The question is, can more be gained by taking a more tactical, targeted approach? We're seeing a lot of information nowadays around the effectiveness of ABM, the fact that it's taking more phone calls to actually get to your target buyer. A lot more insights around who to call, even when to call. You think about the silent sales floor. Well, there could be times of day, if you were doing it by the book, when you were looking at the best times to call, there could be times during the day where it should be quiet, because your prospects aren't going to be there to answer the phone, right? We're trying to be much more targeted in who we reach out to. This idea of, working smarter, not harder. So rather than, cluster bombing the prospect list with a whole bunch of phone calls, why don't I be more targeted about who I reach out to, when I reach out to them, and the pieces of content that I reach out to them with? So it's this really tricky balance of, yes, there is a correlation between more phone calls and activity and pipe gen. Of course, depends on the region and who you're trying to call and so on. But there is also something to be said for working smarter, not harder, and being very targeted in your approach. One more thing I'll say on that, and I know there's different levels of experience in terms of the sales reps that are probably listening to this and different states of maturity of company. I do think there is a correlation as far as, activity, whether you should be really pounding the phones or whether you should be more cerebral and purposeful in terms of your outreach. When it comes to the tenure of a rep, there's something to be said for activity and experience and practice. And sometimes just banging the phone, getting those phone calls, especially when you're earlier in your career, to have those conversations, listen to the objections, get practice up, leaving voicemails. Really, the fundamentals are actually quite important. And so it used to be when younger reps would come to me and they would say, David, like, what should we be doing? The story I told was from the movie Good Will Hunting. Remember the movie Good Will Hunting? Ben Affleck, Matt Damon. Must seem like forever ago. And there was a scene in that movie where Ben Affleck drives up to Matt Damon's house, and he kind of walks to the door, and he has this kind of conversation with Matt Damon. He says, "You know what the best part of my day is?" I don't know if you remember that line, Dave. Remember that scene?
Yeah.
He says, remember, he's like, I don't know I don't forget their name. So I'm going to say, Matt Damon, you know what the best part of my day is? It's when I drive up to your house, and it's the walk between my car and your front door. And I think, you're just going to leave. One day you're going to leave. You're not going to leave a note. You're not going to say goodbye. You're just going to be gone to this better life. Like that's my favorite memory of every day, my favorite feeling of every day. And so the advice I give to new sales reps is I say, hey, you know what my favorite day is? My favorite day is that when you figured out how to be the smartest rep in the room, to not make the calls, but rather be really specific and targeted about who you reach out to and when and what you say and the value you add. That's going to be my best day. But until that day, a really good prescription is just make more calls, right? Make more calls, because you'll just get that experience, right? You'll get that experience till you build up to that point of being really smart and savvy about how you reach out.
Yeah, and it sounds like that was an interesting point that you made about the time of day. That there are studies out there, InsideSales.com and others, that have noticed that there are certain times of the day when you have a much better chance to get people on the phone. And so maybe the response to the sales leader is like, yeah, if it is silent on the sales floor during these peak hours, then yeah, you really should be nervous because they're missing that statistically proven time to be able to reach your audience. Maybe other times of the day, it's not so great because it's been proven that it's harder to get people. And one of the next question I wanted to ask you, and it came in from Tito on the notes, is if they're not on the phone, especially the SDR team, if they're not on the phone, and they are reacting to the new buyer journey and how to interact with people that don't have phones, what are they doing? What should we be nervous that they're not necessarily doing the right thing?
It's a good question. So let's separate that into kind of two buckets. The things that we're happy that they're doing, the things that we're not happy that they're doing. So the things that we're happy that they're doing, things like video. Video is becoming a lot more prominent in business communication. We've seen that when people use video to send messages, open rates go through the roof compared to just sending a generic email. And video is actually something that's hard to do when you're out in the pit of sales with everyone around. You want to create this very intimate and personal experience. So, I have seen reps kind of scurry off into corners and rooms to have those conversations and create really cool videos to send prospects. The other thing is, as we get into this realm of account-based selling, it really involves mobilizing all of the forces at your company towards converting and engaging a particular prospect. And so that doesn't just mean sales, and it may not even mean marketing as well. It could mean people in product. It could be people in business development. It could be people, in customer success. And so I find in our business, we do spend a lot of time connecting with these other stakeholders in our organization away from our desks to help them better connect with our prospects. So, it's another example of why I might be away from my desk, for a good reason. The other piece is just, again, being really focused about when I reach out. Of course, on the flip side, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this as well, but on the flip side, there's of course bad reasons why the sales floor is quiet. I think we live in the age of more distractions than ever before. And it's actually very easy to fool ourselves into thinking that, oh, we're doing research. We're at our computers and we're on LinkedIn and we're on Twitter and, oh, there's a sports score there. And we get like a squirrel running across the yard. We do get distracted. And so I think it's incumbent upon reps to be really, really judicious about how they spend their time, how they set even little micro goals throughout the day, because there are some, time sucks. Absolutely. There is an element of information overload in terms of how much research do I actually need to do to be really efficient with my time. I feel, though, that like we're at this inflection point where there's kind of the rise of the quiet sales floor, because people are getting used to this new paradigm of reps that don't super duper love to make calls, prospects that don't super duper love to get those calls. And so our solution is to get really purposeful and do a lot of research when we reach out. The problem is that the tools that are out there that help us do that research, that should actually make our lives better and go faster, are still being developed. There's all sorts of AI tools and machine learning tools that can help me understand who to reach out to and when. There's tools that can let me know when a prospect of mine is literally opening their email or clicking a link that I sent them, right? And so all of these tools are great, and they can help us be more purposeful and judicious with our time when we reach out. But I still think we're at the early days of those tools, and I feel like because the sales floor and the kind of the quietness and the purposeful nature of it is increasing in our businesses, the tools are going to have to start catching up to help reps make more judicious use of their time, basically doing quicker research, being more focused on their outreach, and just really helping us make use of this new paradigm shift.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I think one of the paradoxes of the silent sales floor is that in order to reach out with some kind of message that will resonate to a prospect, you have to do some research and figure out something that you can put in the message or in the phone call that will, push them to want to connect with you. But the problem is that research takes time, and during that time, the sales floor is quiet. So what you're saying is that there are some tools out there that are being developed to do that. But in the meantime, for your average SDR or SDR manager, it could be the classic, just time management trick where you do a bunch of research in one time block, and then maybe, according to the statistics of when the best time is for you to actually be on the phone, that you say, okay, I'm turning off all my tabs. I'm going to set my tomato timer, for an hour, turning off all my tabs. I have my research all ready to go. And all I'm going to do is make phone calls until I can actually talk to a person. And then that chunks it out. So you're not just in that distraction phase where you're chasing the silver bullet or, over reading the news or doing something else that just ends up being like causing so much, distraction in your day that the sales floor becomes totally silent, right?
Totally. Time blocking is very, very important. We were talking about this a little earlier. One of my favorite times of year, it's tough. I'll say, it's tough in this day and age to take vacation, right? To take time off, because generally when you're on vacation, everyone else is not on vacation. And so the emails keep coming in, the phone calls keep coming in. The exceptions are a few times a year. So Christmas time typically, across North America, even Thanksgiving, US Thanksgiving, we were talking about, I'm thankful being Canadian, being up here during US Thanksgiving, because it tends to get very quiet, is that there's almost this social contract. We all agree that we are not going to email each other, that we're not going to call, right? So there's no flow of email coming in, there's no phone calls, and so we're actually able to unplug and decompress. And I feel it's the same way on a sales floor. And so, if you're trying to do your prospecting or your video calls or your, whatever you're doing, your ABM targeting, and someone else is just pounding the phones, right? It kind of creates this asymmetry. You're like, oh, should I be making phone calls? And oh, you're looking at the web, you're doing research now and looking on LinkedIn. Maybe I should be doing that too. And so if you can architect your sales team to be doing some of the similar activities at the same time, that can help reinforce that social contract, right? So if we know we are all pounding the phones at the same time, that makes it a lot easier and more socially acceptable for me to engage in that activity. Can't always sync up all the activities all the time, but things like call blitzes, prospecting blitzes, this is the time that you're going to do your video messages. I think those are all things that can be scheduled and that can help reinforce that social contract between the teams to actually get that work done and make productive use of those time banks.
Yeah, I really like that idea because on two fronts, from the CEO who's walking around the sales floor and he or she is getting nervous because it's so quiet and they're like, oh shit, we're not hitting our sales numbers. It's super quiet out here. The manager of that team or even whoever's involved in sales development can go up to them and go, look, this is what our schedule's like. We do our call blitzes during the probable best times. We do our research during this time. You happen to be walking by when it was a research time. If you want to support us to help us with the research, then give us some more resources so that we can get somebody to help us with the research and make more calls and extend the call blitzes. And then from the other end, with the sales development managers, you can say like, hey team, like, here's what we're going to do. We're going to block out our time into these very discrete chunks, and here's what we're going to be working on this week to see how it goes. And then during that call blitz time, there's going to be a lot of activity and it's going to be fun and exciting and stuff like that. So Dave, a couple of questions came in. One was around what you guys are doing over at Influitive around like, do you ask your team to hit a certain number of activities per day, and do they have to set up a certain number of meetings per day and things like that? Do you guys manage it to that extent as far as the activity level?
We do. I'm a firm believer in the being a scientist by education of the kind of the equation that leads us to revenue. So kind of just to lay it out there, and I do have an article on my website. I think it's called the secret formula for high impact sales coaching. And the idea is, you take a new rep and you have revenue, which is the ultimate end goal. But I have no expectation of revenue until I see pipe gen, and I have no expectation of pipe gen until I see activity. And so measuring activities actually becomes really, really important. Now, there's lots of things you can do. If you see lots of activity and then no pipe gen, well, there's something going on there. If you see lots of pipe gen and no deals closing, well, that's another thing. And so when I think about measuring activity, it's really important to measure the kind of activity that is relevant to your business. So, for example, at Salesforce, the main activity we would measure is phone calls. How many phone calls a day you were making. And at Influitive, it's kind of a hybrid. We care more about activity. So how many activities a day are you generating? So, for example, we might say we want to see, 100 activities in a day. And those activities could be, phone calls, they could be voicemails, they could be emails, they could be blasts. We want to see you touch 100 people. Now, you got to be careful, of course, with metrics, because you don't want people to start gaming the system and like, oh, I've just called and left like a whole bunch of voicemails. And so it's really important that as you're setting out targets for how you connect with your prospects, what you want to do is make sure that you are segmenting those activities into granular enough buckets. So, for example, rather than just say how many phone calls did you make, think about how many connects did you make or how many meetings did you set up, right? These are all the leading indicators of success. So I would say to the question, tracking activity is really important. It's going to be unique to the organization, and of course, depending on who you're selling to as well. So, for example, if you're selling a product that you're selling to a particular role, your target buyer is someone who actually sits in front of their computer all day and sits in front of a phone and answers it, well, then you're in business. But there's some buyers that don't. They don't sit in front of a phone. If you're selling, for example, technology into restaurant owners, those restaurant owners aren't sitting in front of their phone. In fact, their cell phone is their primary method of communication. So I know some software companies, some technology companies that focus their entire outreach on texting, right? Because texting is the way those people communicate, right? And how many responses are you getting back from those texts? And so again, very, very important to measure. Depends on the nature of your business. But I have seen models where it is exclusively single-threaded through one type of activity, meaning how many calls are you making? Or for example, how many emails, how many texts are you sending? And then other hybrid models where it's typically a combination of calls, emails, texts, connects, and so on. Again, in our business, we do measure activity, but the end result, if you're looking at from a sales development standpoint, is connects. We want to know how many connects we're making, because that's a really good way of figuring out how to help a specific rep maximize the efficiency of their time. So if I'm doing a whole bunch of stuff, but it's actually not translating into any kind of response from a prospect, well, that's bad. And so not only do I need to measure activity, but I need to measure connect. So there is some nuance as well to that earlier part of the sales coaching funnel in terms of how you measure and how you measure the effectiveness in moving from one to the next.
Yeah, and you raised a really good point, Dave, in the uniqueness of each business, because you said, how do the people connect? You gave the restaurant example, and that could kind of come back to the silent sales floor. I mean, you might be walking around going, "Oh, dude, it's so quiet here." Well, the fact is that the target market that you're going after simply doesn't communicate in the way that you're used to. You might have to go out and visit them. You might have to go do events. You might have to do webinars. You might have to do something else that actually appeals to them and gets them into your funnel so you can actually have a connect. So that's really important. And the other quick thing I wanted to mention is I noticed on the technology that a lot of the dialer systems now, you can actually put in a voicemail and just leave it at the click of a button. So as you're going through your day and you're calling people and you get their voicemail, you leave it at a click of a button. So that's going to contribute to the silent, sales floor, because not only are people, they are actually making calls. They are actually on the phone, but when they get the voicemail, which 90% of calls go to voicemail anyways, they're just pressing a button that leaves a canned voicemail. So that's going to contribute to it.
Yeah. Well, I think
about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, voicemails, there was a time where in sales, there was a lot of knowledge and training around how to leave a killer voicemail. What do you say? How long? Do you leave your name and company till the end to kind of generate intrigue? Do you say what you want up front? People are just preconditioned to let their phone go to voicemail anyways. What's actually happening, which is a challenge for modern sales teams who are reliant on voicemail, is that voicemail is going away. I think I saw some stats on Vonage and some very big companies who are actually actually trying to save a lot of money by removing voicemail access from employees that don't use it or need it, right? They go to the employee and say, "Hey, Dave, do you care about your voicemail?" "No?" "All right, we're killing it," right? So voicemail is actually going to be soon becoming a non-viable option for sellers. It is going away, and so that's probably why you're seeing this trend towards minimizing the investment in very complicated, tailored voicemails, because all right, I'll just leave something. They're probably not going to listen to it anyways, and it's going away, in favor of something that is more engaging, more fun, more direct, like a video.
Yeah, definitely. And a question came in that I want to get to. It's a really good question, but the last quick thing on that is, I noticed a trend recently of people call my cell phone and they don't leave a voicemail. And for me, it seems weird because I listen to my voicemails on my cell phone. And so wouldn't it, to me, it just makes sense that, especially if you want to create a buzz on the sales floor and you want to get things going, if you do get somebody's voicemail, go ahead and leave it. At least you're practicing your pitch, or you're trying to say something about your company. Because when I get just like a ghost call, and I pretty much know that it's probably just a machine, making tons of calls. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. One of the biggest challenges with the silent sales floor, and this is actually, if I think back to a societal, I guess, shift or challenge we have now. So you probably remember a day, as I do, when you needed to remember phone numbers. Right? Oh, my parents' phone number, my sister's phone number, my neighbor's phone number. You had to remember all these phone numbers, and you probably wrote them down, and we had address books and so on. And nowadays, you don't have to remember phone numbers. I have relatives in my nuclear family whose phone, my daughter, I don't know what her phone number is. Right? I don't need to. Right? That part of my brain has now been jettisoned, and now it's been replaced by a machine. And so I feel kind of the same way around messaging. Right? When we think about messaging, we have so much help from our ABM campaigns and our email crafting that we almost don't know what to do. Sometimes we get someone on the phone. I remember being at the CEB conference in Las Vegas, and I was speaking to a sales enablement leader at a Genentech, and he was telling me that he gets into work really early in the morning. And so, of course, all of the savvy BDRs who are making their phone calls early in the morning will sometimes get him at his desk, and he'll say, "Okay," he answers the phone. He says, "Okay, you got me. I'm sitting at my desk. I'm by myself. You got 2 minutes. Give me your best shot." And he says, I can't believe people they can't believe that they got through to me. They can't believe that they're getting 2 minutes. They trip all over themselves to deliver their message. They can't do it, right? And part of me thinks, has the portion of our brain that is really helping us focus on messaging and delivering that clear pitch. You mentioned leaving a voicemail. Now, voicemail is not super interactive. You're just, you're saying your 30 seconds and off you go. So even that's something. But are we jettisoning the part of our brain that is used to giving that pitch, 100 times a day so that it's simple and fluid? And in my experience, the answer is yes. Like we're tossing that thing in the garbage, and people are getting worse at pitching, especially as I would say the solutions that we're pushing on the market are much more numerous. They're much more nuanced. They're much more. There's a lot of overlap between solutions. It used to be 2011. The statistic was there was 150 marketing technologies out there to be purchased. Today in 2017, there was 5,000. And you can't tell me they all do something different, right? They're all iterations of each other. They're all overlapping. And so there's a lot of nuance. And so even if I were to muster a 30-second pitch on what I do, it may not be well differentiated. So the key is, because of the silent sales floor, we're not leaving as many voicemails. We're not getting the opportunity to pitch as many times. And so we really need to make a concerted effort to exercise that part of our brains that articulates the pitch, that makes it simple, compelling, and well differentiated, just like this idea of leaving voicemail. So I don't disagree with you. The idea of leaving a voicemail is like a chance to deliver kind of your little micro pitch. But I think it's a bigger problem with the silent sales floor that we are becoming out of practice with delivering our pitch because we don't deliver it as many times as we used to during the course of a day.
Yeah, and I think it presents an opportunity, for sales development managers. If you're having like a daily stand-up or you do a quick meeting, have everybody go around and just articulate, who are we calling on? What are their pain points? How do we help? Like just right off the top of your head, get some practice in saying that so that if you actually do get somebody on the line, you don't blow that one opportunity that you might have, if within the whole day. So I love that. And actually, when I was reading the article that came out a couple years ago on the rise of the silent sales floor, that one of their main points was that because there's not a set process for what people should be doing, they're sitting at their desk not knowing, like, what should I do right now? Everything's kind of, I press a button, the emails go out, I press a button, the voicemails go out. Now what do I do? And then next thing you know, it's a silent sales floor. So you brought that up. There's a couple of questions. We have about 10 more minutes. Got a couple of great questions here, Dave. So I want to make sure that we get to these. One person asked about when we were talking about time management and what tips do we have around effectively blocking out time? So we talked about at the team level for the SDRs, blocking out, we're going to have blitz days, we're going to have research time, we're going to have, ABM time where we go and try to coordinate a play, blocking that out. But what about at the personal level? Any tips there for your average SDR who wants to start blowing up the silent sales floor?
Yeah, no, look, it's the same. I mean, there's certain activities you're going to schedule in conjunction with your brothers and sisters on the sales floor, but there's a lot of things you could be doing on your own during those downtimes. So I don't think it's at all, that different. Schedule some time for prospecting, schedule some time for, your research. Also schedule some time for some account maintenance. I think one of the things that we're really focused on nowadays is reaching out and connecting with the people who are ready to buy, and they're in the right segment, they fit our ideal customer profile. Even folks that maybe we sold to at one company that have now moved to another company, right? I mean, these are all things that are helpful to us in terms of really focusing our time. And these require maintenance as well, right? Like tiering your accounts, making sure that your contacts are up to date, spending some time on, LinkedIn Navigator. All these things are things that you should time box in points of time where you are obviously not in your peak calling zone. So, it actually would be an interesting article to kind of craft like a day in the life of an SDR and all of the things that we might want to time box throughout the day. But I would say not only, the research, but kind of the internal maintenance as well. The other thing that I think is actually quite valuable for SDRs, which we would do a lot of as well, is listening to each other's phone calls. if you have the ability, it's kind of funny. It's kind of like teachers. Teachers teach, and they could learn a lot by seeing other teachers teach, but they don't. They're in their classroom teaching, and they very rarely see anyone else teach. But if they could, then they would be a lot better off. So if you have a tool or technology in your business that can help you listen to recorded phone calls, I know we do at our company, actually multiple tools depending on the nature of your role, that can help you listen to phone calls and share those phone calls. So for example, you might get off a phone call and say, hey, you know what? That was actually quite killer. I tried a new pitch, or I used this objection handle, or I used this technique to navigate from this person to that person. If it was really, really good, share it with your colleagues. And by the same token, as an SDR, take the time to listen to those calls, put together a greatest hits, even calls from AEs and other folks in your organization, blocking out time, not just for the tactical research of how you're going to go do your job, but all of the things that are going to make you better are actually really, really important as well.
Yeah, and I would say, a lot of the offices have the open floor plan. And so if you are listening to calls or you're doing things, instead of going behind closed doors and having those activities, bring it out onto the sales floor. Make sure that it's the time frame that everybody can agree with, so you're not bothering people. But bring the team around and huddle around and listen to a killer call and talk about it, and just get some buzz going out on the sales floor. And then hopefully, when one of the sales leaders walks by, they're going, "Oh wow, there's a lot of cool stuff going on." Rah rah rah. And Dave, I have another quick question here. This is an interesting one. It says, I've been told that texting someone cold is intrusive, as it's more personal than email. What's your take on that? And, people have asked me about this before. I think, we get a lot of those weird texts that come through from spammer companies, and you just look at those and you go, oh God, just block it immediately. But, I would say for the average SDR, that once you have had some kind of conversation with the person, either over the phone or via email, or establish some kind of beachhead, then you can go to text if it's appropriate and you're getting a response from the person. But I think that going straight to text is probably not going to work. What are your thoughts, Dave?
Yeah, so I think two things. I would agree. It feels like text is more intimate, just like we all have our kind of hierarchy of intimacy on our social profiles. Like, I don't care who follows me on Twitter, LinkedIn, I kind of have to know you or at least have a conversation. Facebook, you need to kind of be my buddy, and Instagram, because I'm sharing pictures of my kids and so on. And I actually feel the same way with respect to business communication. I think it's actually not practical to initiate a relationship over texting. Right, because there's the real estate is so little. There's no signature, there's no website link, like there's no rich content, and so I would definitely start a relationship outside of text, and then quickly move to text. In fact, when I think about my best reps, the ones that tell me that they're texting with their prospects are actually the ones I'm like, oh my gosh, like you've reached the nirvana, you've reached the texting level of your relationship. Now, look, you can do it a couple ways. You can either, finish your call with the prospect or the customer and say, hey, do you mind if I text you, if there's ever a need for follow-up? We always have our phones with us. For whatever reason, texting seems to get priority over email. So I think it's good practice to move to texting. If you want to ask for permission, that's great. If you want to ask for forgiveness, I'm kind of okay with that too. And you can always just tell the SDR not to text. So I do agree with you that it's not the first level relationship, but definitely something you can progress to. But the other thing I would say is this statement I'm very fond of, which is never fall in love with your sales tactics. Meaning, just because in one instance you ask someone for permission and that worked for you, it doesn't mean in another instance you just can't text someone out of the blue if you feel it's appropriate based on the nature of their role. Hey, I know you're driving around all the time. I know you're on the road in airports. You're probably not checking your email as much. I thought I'd send you a text, right? Here's some context out of respect. It goes the same for any tactic. You talk about using video. You talk about, using ABM, silly things like handwritten notes. I say silly things like old school things, handwritten notes, little gifts that you send someone. Never fall in love with your sales tactics. And so I definitely encourage any SDR out there as you're thinking about how to combat the quiet sales floor, don't get yourself in a rut thinking, oh yeah, in order to fix the quiet sales floor, I need to send videos or I need to ask permission to do text. Change it up. Don't fall in love with your sales tactics, because as soon as you do, the thing that you're doing is going to stop working. It's going to stop. It's going to reduce in impact and effectiveness. So I applaud that. In fact, I'll tell you a quick story. You talk about texting someone. I was at the Serious Decisions conference in London in October, and I was talking to a fellow who said that he had heard of a rep who closed a deal at month end by FaceTiming his prospect, you talk about intimacy, while his prospect was on vacation, and whether you think that is a bold move or not, I do applaud that person for thinking outside the box and trying something a little different, not falling in love with their sales tactics. So, by all means, that you want to be respectful in how you outreach. You want to reach out in a way that is consistent with how your prospect chooses to be communicated. But you know what? Try stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Test and make course corrections. Dave, we got a couple more minutes. I got a couple more questions here that are really good. This is a really good point. Do you think it sounds like a mass market product to call someone and have a lot of noise on the sales floor? Because you know how when you call the customer service and you can hear all this crazy stuff happening in the background, it's like, who is this? Is it a telemarketing situation type of thing? And I think that's a really good point, because you've got the sales leadership, and the owner of the company wants a crazy, loud, exciting sales floor, but then the end user who you're actually trying to impact doesn't want it to sound like there's a million other people in the background making noise. So how do you recommend dealing with that?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, I know, at Salesforce, depending on, the office you were in, we had different noise canceling features. I've seen other offices that have the same thing. So kind of like even things that are in like the ceiling that kind of project a cone of silence around you a little bit. So like you can kind of hear other people, but the people on the phone are kind of shielded. There's lots of different headset technologies and so on. But I would agree, if I'm a prospect and I'm on the phone, I like a little bit more of that intimate experience. I don't like to yell. I don't like to, to say, excuse me, can you repeat that? So I don't mind a little bit more of a quieter environment. I don't think, the success or failure of your business is going to hinge on whether or not, it's quiet on the other side. I just think it makes a difference in, again, personal preference. Perhaps you have a business that is focused on calling elderly people, and maybe you don't want to have, loud noises going on in the background, right? It's funny, as a consumer, I always, I'll always, you call into a call center, and it's quiet. I always wonder, like, are they working from home? Is this like a telecommuting thing? Sometimes you hear a dog bark, but to be honest, I don't think anything of that. I think it just all depends on, what environment is most comfortable for you.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it kind of sounds like it goes back to the time blocking, suggestion. It's like during the fun call blitz times when you're going to bring the VP out onto the floor and the CEO is going to walk by, then just go for it. Just pedal the metal, make a ton of calls. During the research time, if you want to call somebody who, you think it would add value to have a silent background, then maybe, you can go into the conference room and do that. But it just kind of depends on, the situation that you're in and who you're calling. I got one more quick question from Catherine. It says, I manage accounts that my sales teams close, and I'm not in sales, but I have very few accounts. What would you recommend for someone like me? That's a tricky one. I mean, I think maybe you need to get some more sales or more accounts, kick your sales team in gear, and the silent sales floor over there. What do you say, Dave?
Yeah, no, I mean, the role of account manager is different than an SDR who's, really trying to hustle and drum up business. So I don't have as many concerns over an account manager having, fewer accounts that they can, lend the proper amount of attention and focus to. So yeah, I don't have any concerns there.
Yeah, I think the main concern with the silent sales floor is, again, the VP of sales or somebody on the executive team walks by, and number one, there's not enough sales happening. There's not enough appointments being set. And number two, everyone's just tapping on their thing. So Dave, we're up against the hour. Somebody actually asked what the painting is behind David Priemer. So you've got a painting. I've got a painting behind me. What's your painting?
Oh, this is a fantastic. It's actually not a painting. It is a page from a flip chart diagram. It was from Simon Sinek. It was at the Sales Machine Conference in New York in 2016. And he gave a talk, which he's now giving in increasing frequency, on what he calls the infinite game. And I think he has a book coming out on it. But the idea is that we all play games in our life and in business. And some games we play to win, because there's rules and winning and losing. And some games we play just because we love playing them, and it's our why. It's what we do. And so he was up on stage. He gave this amazing talk, which he apparently ad-libbed, and he kind of drew a diagram, a little whiteboard flip chart of like how he illustrated this this infinite game. And so I was kind of helping with the conference. I was at Salesforce at the time. So after the event, the organizers actually gave me the flip chart that he used on stage, and I brought it to him and had him. You can see like the little red in the middle is he autographed it for me. So I hung it in my office here, and I keep it up to always remember to stay true to my why, to play my infinite game, and to do what I do because I love to do it and I'm passionate about doing it, and not because I'm trying to win anything. So it's I enjoy having it there. Good question.
That's awesome, man. Well, thanks a lot. I think that folks on the call definitely got a few nuggets and can take back and hopefully during those peak times get some fun happening on the sales floor, be able to talk to the leadership about what you're doing, and then on the off times really focus on what it's going to take to get those conversations going when you guys get back on the phone. So Dave, thank you so much. We'll see you at cerebralselling.com, and just really appreciate your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Dave. Always great to connect. And thanks everyone on the webinar today for joining us. Couldn't, the song, there ain't no audience, there ain't no show. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks everybody. This will be available online, so we'll see you over on YouTube. Bye-bye.